the pragmatic CSO, thinking integrated security. And we have some experts from IBM. Let me introduce Mr. Krishnan Jagannathan. He's a business security advisor from the Security Tiger team from IBM Emerging Markets. He's come all the way from Singapore to help us. And so there's one thing that particularly stood out for me, and as a security journalist, I would just want to highlight that thing about Krishnan. He's been advising governments in Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, and recently in South Asia on formulating their cyber defense strategies. So that particularly to me is very exciting. And if I do get the time afterwards, I'll ask him a few questions on that. And we also have Mr. Neeraj Gupta, please. So he's a subject matter expert on standards and audits. We'll be throwing some difficult questions at him, hopefully. We have someone from Isaka here who's also a subject matter expert in the same thing. So we have some time right now because people are yet on their way. There is just one small thing. If we can source the video, I'll try and do it by the end. And I was talking to Mohit, who is also from IBM, about this thing that of late, every superhero movie that you see, there is one new element in it. There is a new sidekick that the superhero has, whether it is Die Hard 4, whether it is the latest James Bond movie, whether it is the latest Bond movie. There is a new person in the superheroes team who is a hacker. A superhero basically cannot survive without security. And if a superhero can't survive without security, then we know what the world has come to. So what we did was we built a movie around this.
You want the movie?
If you have it, we'll show it at the end. Just get it. So Apurva is our video guy who made that movie in no time. And we showed it at the beginning of our summit last time in December. So none of you were there, which is why I was asking if you were there, you would have seen the movie. We'll try and show it at the end, but it's a really cool, fun movie to watch, and it puts the point across pretty smartly. So now that is one trend from the cultural entertainment side. There's a lot more trends on security we'll discuss, and I'm just going to invite Mr. Krishnan Jagannathan to take the floor now.
Yeah. Also let me introduce Saurabh to the audience. Saurabh basically is our architect who puts security operations center. He's the implements them and manages them. And so he's a practitioner in the room, just to close the loop. So you have the standards guy, not completely woolly-headed, and you have me, fully woolly-headed. Then you have a guy on the ground, which is sort of course, we belong to different companies with an idea, but that apart, we just wanted to basically represent our capabilities across the world, because we run about, we support major customers across the world for their security operations, which is something that we very carefully undermarketed. So we will basically kick this discussion off with the outcomes of that organization within IBM, which is basically the X-Force organization. So, do you want me to jump into it, or do you have?
No, I don't have
some points of introduction. So the X-Force is basically an organization, like I said, which is a research cum operations sort of organization. For those who are familiar with IBM, this came with the ISS acquisition, and we have taken it forward to a great extent. You'll see what it's all about. It's not as secretive as it sounds. We run basically a follow-the-sun operation across the world, where lots of big names, global majors, are basically supported for security operations out of the major, locations worldwide, such as Atlanta, and we have the Gold Coast, as well as a mini operation center in Bangalore, which is slowly coming online for the Indian customers. And it has to be global, essentially, because most countries have data residency issues, and more importantly, we have large staff actually shadowing and basically taking over from others. like I said, in the follow the sun operation. Now this X-Force report is released twice a year. It's biannual report, which is the fruit of the labor of the X-Force group around security research. It informs CISOs and CIOs of the world, of the large organizations, about trends in threat vectors and how those threat vectors change. What are the most current trends? A step back view of what has been happening over the last half year. What potentially you should be planning for the next half going forward, and also a larger view of areas of concern. So let me just jump into that. I won't be actually taking you through every slide of the X-Force report, killing you by PowerPoint. I guess our marketing guys will share it with you. It's a PDF as well as a PowerPoint presentation, whatever you prefer.
Before you show the latest top 3-4 trends, you want to just quickly ask them what they think are the top 3-4 trends, and then
sure.
So, what do you think is the biggest pain within security networks in private enterprises? Abhishek, you're probably dealing with it every day at Ericsson.
You take care of it.
What do you think are the biggest security trends?
Trends?
Yeah.
The biggest is about discussing about the bring your own devices.
BYOD, sorry. Right, we have one on BYOD, which I'm going to slash mobile is what I'm going to say. Perfect.
Mobility also.
Mobility, alright, that's pretty much common. Anyone else on anything? What are you dealing with? What are you dealing with, sir? At BMW, you guys are making cars which now have computers in them. What are you dealing with?
I drive the best part, and obvious the mobility is
mobility. So everyone's bothered about mobility. Is there anyone who's anything beyond mobility and is a little bit worried about that? Okay, so we are going to scare them, I think, by the end of this presentation. All right, to you now.
Yeah. Okay. So this is basically this just introduces the X-Force as a capability to you, which is, as you can see, the quantum of events that we manage per day and the quantum of events that we triage. The whole idea here is we have a security operations center because there would be multi-million, billion events that come up from the security instrumentation. But the key thing is how much are you able to reduce that? How many false positives are you able to reduce and throw out so that you can focus on the real threats out of those events. So separating the real basically the real signals out of the chatter that you have out there. That's a key thing. You can see the number of clients that we manage worldwide. These are large clients. And of course, it's across the world, as you can see. The key thing is the research and the practice essentially is tied together here. So it's not plain simple research. These are the guys that run the operation centers who come up with these with the outputs that you get over here. The research outputs are fed into our security devices. So an IPS or next-gen IPS that comes from IBM that is sold to you is basically kept current with X-Force, IP reputation and other filters that basically are fed into it on a fortnightly basis. Those of you who have air-gap networks, this can be done on batch mode. So both these possibilities are there. This is a view looking back at 2011. This just shows you, an interesting view, slice and dice, the kind of typology of attacks that the world has faced, the kind of organizations that have been attacked, including defense forces, including governments, FSS organizations like Citibank, and then of course the manufacturing organizations, we call it that, electronics essentially, like Sony. And the fundamental thing, the big thing over here that you need to notice is the fact that it's those attacks that are that need to be disclosed as attacks to the public to the customer base, which are the most sensitive as well as the most, what should I say, having the hugest financial as well as reputational impact. So there are some attacks such as disclosure of customer information from places like Google, potentially, the OTT providers that basically need you to communicate to the customers, make it public, communicate to the regulators, as well as take the cost of sending the communications out. So security can't be just taken for granted. It's something that basically needs to be kept current, needs to be secure, make sure there's no gap, and basically ensure going forward that you are in a position to prevent an exploit from happening. So going back to organizations, perhaps this is one way of paraphrasing any investment, and a business case that you have built to invest for in security. As far as the first half was concerned, there has been a great deal of improvement on the green side, as you can see, with the way in which organizations, rather the vendors, have been approaching security of their products. They've been releasing patches in good time and a huge volume of patches, which has been pretty good. Also, those attacks which basically have been out of embedded applications like readers, especially PDF, have been contained using a ring-fenced perimeter as far as the application itself is concerned, so that any I would say unsafe programming or code that causes basically a crash or a failure doesn't basically open up to the operating system. So a kind of ring fence within which the application operates, such as a PDF reader, has helped a great deal. Now you also can see that attack activity has increased as far as attacks that we know very well, such as SQL injection and cross-site scripting and so forth. This is worrying, and this points to the fact that we've been taking application security, web application security as a granted, which we can't do. So we need to actually ensure that the vulnerabilities in our web applications essentially are informed to our intrusion prevention system, as well as the vulnerabilities that are potentially going to be exploited are known to our security intelligence system. So these are two key pillars of the whole thing. What comes out of it is basically application security cannot be ignored. Obfuscation techniques to evade IPS. These basically are patterns, signature-related mechanisms to defend your network. They will not work going forward because malware will be deposited in small fractional pieces across multiple devices within your network, and then it'll be brought together. Multiple administrators administrate multiple parts of your network, and some of them don't do it well. That's basically what the attackers exploit. So once the fractional malware is within your network, it's brought together, assembled, and then you have a Trojan. And you could not detect it because you're running signature-based defense systems. So obviously, this points to a piece of technology that IBM had, which is called virtual patching, which doesn't rely on patching at all. So, and it's been more, instrumental in picking up zero-day attacks. And of course, as you can see, and as you just said, BYOD increasingly is going to be the threat challenge going forward. Essentially, because you do not know what devices you have within your organizations. If you do not have an inventory, then you can't protect. So within IBM, which is one of the largest IT organizations on the planet with 500,000 employees, we can say that we have at least a policy in place where we need to register devices when you bring it into the network. sure that the security policy of IBM is enforced on that particular device as soon as it comes on the network through endpoint security measures. The same applies to your organizations too. Fundamentally, inventory has to be known so that you can protect whatever is known. Whatever is unknown and on your network, you'll never be able to pick it up. So patching and enforcement of policy goes hand in hand with inventory management, which is fundamental. You can see that the vulnerability disclosures essentially have grown. So attacks are on the rise. And these are attacks with huge impact, like I told you, where disclosure needs to be done. Like I said, sandboxing has proved efficient, a mechanism essentially to contain vulnerabilities within embedded applications like readers. So maybe this is the model going forward that we need to use, which is basically the model we also promulgate when we actually provide a solution for you to write mobile applications. So it's called WorkLite, and WorkLite allows you to create mobile applications for multiple platforms and ensure it runs within a security footprint within that device, and so that your company data stays protected as it moves from within your network onto the device and back. Web vulnerabilities on the rise, as you can see, there's a little bit of a breakdown there. Most of it, as you can see, 47% is from web apps, and this is one area that we are trying to protect. We have a solution called AppScan that protects mobile applications, that protects applications that you've already invested in, and checks them out for vulnerabilities, takes that information and feeds it into the intrusion prevention system so that it can watch out for those threat vectors as they are played out. So that's a key aspect, and this is something that we generally don't pay attention to. So we have a third-party developer in-house, and when we accept the application that's developed by them, security is never part of the acceptance process. So it's only functional acceptance. You whip the backsides to make sure that they deliver functionally, not securely. So until we actually build security into SDLC and have tools to support that, we'll forever be actually playing the catch-up game in this space.
Is cross-site scripting? There is cross-site scripting, which is one of the largest, as you see.
Yeah, true.
What is cross-site?
Which is basically a web application, threat vector. Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask one question as well. I know that SQL injections, SQL injections have been in the news since 2009, if not earlier. How many of us have taken something to prevent or safeguard against SQL injections?
Some bit of it, yes, for sure. At least that's a no. Yes. Some bit of it, yes.
Yeah, because it is one of the most fundamental, and you see in 2012 it's still one of the top ones. So it's a little surprising that something which is so fundamental is still amongst out there. So can we have a show of hands, a quick show of hands? How many of us have taken safeguards against SQL injections? Yeah. So would you like to share something? What have you done?
See, when there are security, what do you call it? One of the company's security standards, or it's a tool that we have deployed on an application which is facing on SQL, which actually protects it. That's what we have done. But this is application. We done it based
on the application. Alright. But do you run any e-commerce site? Sorry.
Not as of now, we plan to run, and this will be not available.
Right, because for an e-commerce site, this is absolutely essential.
So you protect the mediation.
This is for an internal app, not for the e-com. We are not there for the e-com space today. If we are planning to have an e-com space, then this is one of the bigger. So we go, we will create a tool or a tap on a service which will do it, which will sit on top of the application, and which will do that. Which is part of the agenda which is coming in. when we come up with.
Right.
So cross-site scripting is actually a more evolved SQL injection. It doesn't. It goes through those same vulnerabilities of form-filled questions that it goes through, and it brings out it. So a SQL injection basically pulls out your database, right? But a cross-site scripting messes with your code. So if I then see the code on my device, it will look like a garbled web page. So rather than messing with my code, it has messed with my site. So that's the difference.
I mean, both are on the SQL side.
Yeah, both get in through your client-facing vulnerabilities.
So there are two approaches. One is an agent-based approach.
That is applicable also in the DMS also.
Sorry?
Applicable also for the DMS.
I didn't understand.
DMS management system, something like that.
Yeah, because you have to have an SQL injection comes in from the client end. A DMS system will be sitting at your backend trying to protect it. So you have to kind of match both sides of vulnerabilities.
Your dealer management would be more external side, right, for your partners to access your systems. So to a certain extent, there is some authentication that exists where you authenticate the partner. It's part of your network in a sense. You might be doing it on a. Is it done in a federated mode, or are you connecting directly into your system? Sure, still a web application. You're opening it up. Yeah. So it's not an anonymous kind of access. That's the difference. Nothing much really has changed here. I don't think we can see a pattern really, as far as exploit disclosures are concerned. This is huge and will remain huge as more and more content comes on board. Al-Qaeda used to transmit most of its information as JPEGs or PDFs. So you really don't know what can be transmitted over that channel. It's a situation of a catch-up game. Content vectoring potentially is one way of handling this. But yeah, rights management, the right kind of accessing the right kind of content through the right website is a key thing that we need to consider. Of course, there will always be idiots in your network who will be doing things that you don't expect them to do. So that's where I guess the opportunity is for vendors to move forward.
I think they keep your job alive.
Not too sure.
So this is what you see here. The trend is the mobile attacks are not really based on any smartness. Essentially, it's a scenario of hijacking the user to sites where they download counterfeit applications or applications that don't really work. So it's currently not reached a stage where this is exploiting the mobile OS per se, but that would be the next stage.
It should be on the way, I guess, because the way mobile is kind of penetrating the market and you're running the apps, I'm quite sure that there must be people already working on it.
True, they will. But the point is there are so many versions out there.
Which makes it difficult. It's not easy, but and if in mobile it's too early to talk about it, but if in mobile you talk about it, which are the ones which are getting more vulnerable? Which are the environments that is there an Android which is a problem? You can't see much of a trend because they're not in the stock.
True.
What is it? What should be on your client? What kind of protection mechanism should you have? That should be something good to look at.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll make a note of that. I'm going to look at that. But I don't recollect the specific of the report. But there is the 2.2 and 2.3 versions of Android which are most susceptible right now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And one reason why it is so is because 70 or 75% of Android phones are still 2.0. There are very few ICS and jelly beans out there. But I will take that point and I'll get back to later.
Would there be some data available on this in terms of?
That's what I'm saying. I'm going to get that data and I'm going to circulate an email for everyone and try and send everyone.
There is the rest of the report basically contains slicing and dicing of this information. Like you can see, a whole bunch of graphs there that go into details, such as that. I'm not going to take you through all of them today. I'm just giving you the top overview and challenges looking forward. I want to have a discussion with you specifically with regards to how security maps to your specific industries, and perhaps get to a level 200 discussion with you, rather than give you this. This can basically be shared with you, and then you can come back to us with further questions. Yeah? Of course, like I said, vendors have done a better job, and perhaps will be doing a better job moving forward, patching their systems. Perhaps they themselves have implemented application security internally within their organizations in the development cycle, and that's key. There are one or two things that are important here. One is SDLC in the acceptance, security in the acceptance cycle within the SDLC. The other aspect is building security patterns in, building security awareness, as well as safe coding as a practice. All these three are key, and this applies to just about anybody. Yeah. APT is a key, leitmotif. It will exist forever. It's basically like the line of control. Then keep probing and finding out where holes and potential vulnerable hosts are within your network, and then use them as springboards for attack. So this is not something that we're not aware of, but the fact is that multiple vectors will be used. So it's not just one, multiple vectors will be tried out. The key thing to understand here is not basically rocket science. The attacks are not rocket science. So essentially, it would be a scenario where they hijack credentials one way or the other, in band, out of band. Of course, idiots within your network, that's another aspect. Credentials that are not swept, privileged credentials that are floating around, all these need to be controlled. And that's where the standards part essentially comes in. Enforcing standards has been a hygiene sort of discussion and a conversation forever. But now, more than ever, we have a scenario where both, all three prongs of security, which is people, process, and technology, need to be integrated, need to come together, and need to keep these network secure and current, which is fundamental. APTs are all about asynchronous attacks, asymmetrical attacks into your network. And this could be just about anywhere, like I said, out of band as well. Out of band in conjunction with in band. USB sticks being inserted into critical segments of your network that potentially control your instrumentation, SDLC, SCADA, in manufacturing environments, in oil and gas environments, in utility environments. So it's a whole host of things that can happen. So it's a question of enveloping, expecting, and then enforcing standards. So I just, like Neeraj to give his view as far as standards go, as far as specific standards go, such as everybody expects an ISO 27000X discussion when it comes to security, but it's a conjunction of quite a few standards, including enterprise architecture standards like COBIT, and pieces like ITIL that come into picture, and then your own versions which suit your organizations that need to be enforced. Fundamentally, an architecture needs to be put in place, which consists of enterprise architecture, data architecture, and security architecture. And these are not, some things that you take for granted, especially in large organizations such as yours. Yeah.
Thank you, Krishnan. Thanks a lot. As far as standards concerned in the field of information security, one thing I would like to just take you back in 1901, when the standard was formed. The very first standard in the world came, called BS1. I don't know if this group knows about that standard or not. British Standard 1. And that standard was used first time in the country. It's another surprising factor. in 1901, obviously, India was a British colony at that time, and they were laying the railway tracks. The thickness of the wooden sleeper, the size of the nail, and what should be the thickness of the iron piece, etc., etc. Those were about 21 parameters with the wrote the standard, and that's how the standard was born. And up till now, they are going, for example, I see you from auto industry. The TS16949 is one of the most important standards that is followed. This is an industry specific. One part is you are following the standard. The other part is you are pretending to follow standard. And if you know, especially in India, you see a lot of companies saying ISO 9000 certified company. As large as corporations like in airports, they write under the name of the airport ISO 9000 certified. So to me, it's like a marketing gimmick, because to me, it doesn't say anything. Whereas on the other side, a company like ours, we don't know we are ISO 9000 certified company. So we follow standards, not just ISO 9000, but we have our own standard. And likewise, there are multiple standards. So that's one point. You know what is ISO 27001? You have 11 domains, you have 130 controls, you have got COVID 5 now, you've got CMI level, maturity level. So there are so many standards you can go on and on and on. So basic fundamental factor in the standard is the Deming cycle, which is the plan to check out cycle. So when you understand that, and to the context of information security, the most important piece is doing the risk assessment piece. When I say doing risk assessment to your confidential data, to your asset which you want to be protected, one of the key fundamental, or one of the key reasons for a CISO is how can I keep the bad guy out of the system? That's one of the big concerns, whether within the company and outside the company, obviously. The bad guy should not hit my system, whether electronically or physically. And I'm not saying that companies who follow standards, they are 100% secure company. But yes, companies who follow standards, they know how to measure, and when you measure, you can manage. But for sure, if you can't measure, you can't manage. So when I say measurement is, in this room there are 14 people I can see. If I ask a very straightforward question is, how many of you know about your critical information systems in your company? Listed 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And who is responsible for their security?
Sure. The IT guys.
Yeah. So the IT is custodian. IT is not the owner.
Yeah.
But the whole IT, CIO, what part of IT? The whole things, including security also.
Yeah.
He is only owner of all the things.
I'm actually a tutor, so I'm looking for a board, but I wish I could head up and design something. It's okay.
See, in our business, I come from Quattro, and we are a platform-based company for mid-sized companies in the US. And because we are platform-based, it's IT, as you rightly said, is just a custodian, and the business owners, that those are critical assets for them. So as a result of that, we understand, we do VAPDs with them, we kind of actually go through what kind of risks in terms of data at rest and data in motion and data in storage, and data in transit. So we do that kind of work.
Right. So that's one side of it. What I'm saying is how many critical information this particular department has.
Yes.
For example,
including that. I'm saying, for example, there may be particular functions or particular businesses where, which are customer facing, and therefore there would be clear customer information, which becomes very important. There could be technical IPs, which are very important. There could be some scripts, which are very important. So they're very critical. So it all depends on the particular business.
So the fundamental message here is that one needs to take a look at security both from a IT lens, and that's not the only way, that's not that broad wash you can take. basically is, and that's how we differ from a lot of other vendors out there, who have a stack of products, but they just drop them as security products out there. The point here is to get it in the context of the business, context of a telco, context of the bank,
That's right.
context of basically a logistics company, and map it to the business models. More importantly, how do you elevate, pull out security from that bottom line pit where it's parked, and basically bring it to the level of a top line contributor. That's when a CISO essentially takes his seat on the table, on the executive table. And that's what IBM potentially likes to do with their CISO clients. How do you justify the next 15 projects that you need to basically carry out, or that you plan to carry out in the next, let's say, 25 months? So when you basically put it across as I need to have single sign-on, or I need to have federated identity management, you need to translate that. And how do you translate that into a business that you're enabling? That's fundamentally what's important. That's why, the broad brush, IT is responsible for security view, although it's right from an organization standpoint, but should be rethought of, perhaps. Because IT consists of two aspects. One is basically the operational IT aspect, password reset, provide me access. The other aspect is threats and management of threats. So that's where things are moving to now, with the government, with the regulatory policy, that's basically been set up, like the National Telecom Policy, or perhaps the Gopal Swami report of the RBI, whatever it is for banking, Gopala Krishnan report for banking. You basically have to comply on a bunch of standards, which cover not just IT, but the business systems as well, the operation systems as well. And I'm sure that there must be similar ones for manufacturing.
So, Krishnan, if I could just interrupt and hold on to that point, because you mentioned standards, and that there are a lot of people out there who are just aware of standards, but not really doing anything, or just pretending to follow standards. And it's good that you pointed out about the regulatory requirements. And we actually did a survey which said that the CISOs and the board is most worried about compliance. So I just have a question for Neeraj at this point. That is it really a CISO-driven thing to follow standards? Is it a board-driven thing to follow standards? Or is it a compliance-driven thing to follow standards? What do you think is going to bring about that change, which all of us really want to see? Because we are sitting here because we are concerned about security. So what is it, do you think, will bring about that change?
So information security is a boardroom discussion anyway.
I agree with that, yeah.
So it's not just a discussion which happens at the idea. It goes like the board, and it obviously gets supporting from different business owners. So as long as they are clear, and as long as you provide the clear picture in front of the CEO that yes, this is the information which is lying here, and this is how I'm going to protect it. Right? So compliance is a checkbox, a tick box thing. Okay. This is not I'm talking about.
Yeah, one difficult tick box to
right. So that's what I'm saying. So it actually differs from company to company. Right? So you said compliance, yes, I comply. I'm wearing seat belt, but I'm not actually. So just to the way these truck drivers drive, if you ever notice, they don't put the plug in. But in a good car, like let's say BMW, sometimes your car will not install if you can program like that. Like in Nissan US, it's like as long as you close the door, the flag will come automatically. It depends upon what kind of measures you're taking. But saying that, keeping that in mind, compliance will happen automatically as long as you're following the standards, right? If you're clear on your objectives and your goals, what you set for the protection of that critical information, and you follow standards and you have the techniques to, to demonstrate to the rest of the group, it will happen automatically.
But if it's okay with you, can I spend a minute more on?
Sure, you can.
But compliance is getting more and more complicated. and there are more and more, there are compliance which is happening. I'm basically coming to GRC. But what I want to bring out is that how can, and I think that it is ultimately the CISO or the IT which is going to bring about a change in GRC. There is operations managing his own standards. There is finance managing their own standards. There is IT guys managing their own privacy standards and all other sorts of standards. I personally think that it's a great opportunity for a CISO to take that one leap above and consolidate those things, all those standards into what we call GRC. But how does he do that? There are technology solutions out there, I'm sure there are. So can you spend a minute or two on just talking about...
I'm not clear on the question. What is it that CISO...
The question is that because compliance and standards are followed in silos across different departments of the company.
But not anymore now. Not,
which is what I'm saying. But
the organization would follow, will have the same role. Will have...
I agree on the intent. How many of us have a unified view of standards and compliance in our organizations? Can we have a show of hands?
I think the fundamental difference to me between compliance and standards is compliance is a must to do. Standards is optional. And that's why most of the people will stay, might have stayed away from the standard, but compliance is for the most cases where the regulatory compliance is must to do, you will ensure that. So whatever is an optional then comes out in the bucket to say how much do I invest to do it. And that's where it starts. It's not straightforward. If you follow standards, certainly you reach compliance for sure. But to deploy all the standards rightfully, right? And somebody has to take a logical call. Compliance is regulated.
So fundamentally, the bridging factor here is a risk model.
For sure.
Exactly.
See, it's also with the fact that what is the potential level of risk versus the potential cost. At the end of the day, that's what the reason maker is.
We'll be discussing that in the second section, where IBM's approach is to see there is operational risk, whether it's in finance or any other industry. In finance, it's very clearly defined as credit risk and market risk, and the third part being IT security risk. IT security risk is something that can be automated. Fundamentally, compliance automation is getting to be where the action really is. And what we are trying to do is standards map to security controls that are relevant to your organization based on the risk model, right? And that's where you drop your investments. Now let's assume you pick up 40 controls. Basically, you can then measure how those controls are being, what's the state of those controls through the test plans. The test plans basically define a bunch of business rules. And those business rules basically get fired or they fail. And when there's a failure happening, those business rules fire and you have no right. So you pick up that and feed it into the GRC software platform. And that's the way in which we are trying to automate it as far as possible. Just to let you know, those of you who are not aware, this is one big area where we're working. But that's to answer your question as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying.
Something
Yeah.
what he said. If you take an example of using the production data in the test environment. So today, law says that your sensitive personal information should not be used outside what the department, and they should be having a magnifying glass that, okay, if SPI is there, it is protected. Now it is up to you. I mean, whether the practice is there, and you're pulling out the production data into the test environment, without any obfuscation to what they want to do. So this is a classic example of compliance. Okay, your company has taken a decision. Okay, no SPI will be found, but sensitive personal information lying in test environment is a clause in compliance.
Any law that to transfer the production data to the tester, any law in that also? Any legal?
Yes, it will come automatically. When you say sensitive personal information, your card, data, card number as well as, because you can't test the software unless you have those 16 or 15 digits. and the name. If you're picking up as it is, so name and card number becomes sensitive.
So a good example would be comparing the hotel industry with the finance industry. The finance industry, of course, any disclosure of this information is basically almost criminal. So test data management is a necessity. It becomes a information lifecycle imperative. You have to implement it. So we have test data management where we obfuscate customer information while developing new releases of applications and testing those applications. Because functionally you require a few fields, the rest of the fields are just there because they've been dumped over there. So obfuscation happens, and therefore you comply to the data lifecycle, that you define for your organization. The same thing doesn't exist as a regulatory compliance in the hotel industry. So you have your access cards. How often do we actually, return those access cards without snipping them? Those access cards carry a lot of personal information, which may translate into useful information as we go forward. So the entire data, booking data that you had essentially, or parts of it, is lying on that card. And there's no control on that. And I carry that card with me, dump it into a dustbin or something like that. Anybody can pick up from there. So yeah, I'm not such an important guy. But if I wear one, lots of my information would be right out there, which could be relevant to something.
So one more thing I would like to explain on what he just recently did with the telecom industry. The TRAI has come out with the regulation on the privileged users, what they do and how they should do it. So Saurabh has led that piece of the telecom company.
So why don't you talk about it? Vinay, can you hand over a mic to him? And while you're doing that, I have a question. I just want to know that, do we have a privacy law in India? How many of us think that we have a privacy law in India? Just raise your hands.
There is a law.
Yes,
There is a law.
There is a law. There is a law for privacy in India?
Yes.
Alright, and we're all aware about it? We are all aware of what it says?
It's a different thing to have a law and a different thing to make sure that.
Yeah.
I think it is only
So just for curiosity's sake, last year I asked this question in my conference. Everyone raised their hands, there wasn't a law. This year you guys are all lucky, the law has recently come in. But last year there was no law and everyone confidently raised their hands and said there is a privacy law in India. Anyway, you can start.
So I would first like to answer your question that what is that enforcement factor we have with respect to the test data versus the production data. The one of the standard which in general being followed in the financial industry is the PCI DSS, which specifically talks about that how do you manage and how should you manage your test data. So, so that is one of the standard which gives the clear guidance that how the test data or the production data needs to be managed. On top of it, when we talk about the privilege IDs, so the things that evolved and the new threats that evolved, and the reason now what we've been talking about over internet, external threat, this and that. So a new vector of a threat which came, in every IT organization, I mean nobody can skip out of it, is the administrators who are managing that information, so all the critical information and the entire, so whatever your company secrets are, those secrets in a digital form is there in your computers, which are being managed either by in-source employees or the outsourced employees. They are the administrator and they can do anything and everything with the data. And it has been seen, and there are evidence available which says that they have steal the data, deleted the audit trails, logs, etc., and lived after it happily. So just considering that, so there are new regulations or the regulatory enforcement, and even the IT Act also now having this the amendment with respect to that how your privileged users are being monitored and managed and controlled. So you all have heard about this term called privileged identity management and privileged user management, etc. So that is where the focus is, and recently, the one of the enforcement which is there by the TRAI in India on the all the telecoms, wherein they have been making a big investment in telecom side, and these are the eye openers. So till the time there was no regulatory enforcement with respect to the privilege, identity, and the user management, the risk assessment was never being conducted on that particular ground. That okay, how much is the risk we carry? So when this risk was carried, so it was eye-opener that there is nothing left out in the organization. A contractor person who is managing who is the administrator of XYZ system or information asset in the organization is the king, and he can do anything and everything with the data. They don't delete it, they don't do anything, they simply read it out, take away, use that information in any form or fashion. So that is how our privilege, identity, and user management, the overall requirement came in, and we. So that is where the research came in. So IBM research. So we were having a tool. You all have heard about that identity and access management tool of IBM called Tivoli Identity Management and Access Management. So what our research guy and the developers did in that space is we have made that particular tool more and more intelligent so that we can capture, control, and the kind of a control which is required by the different regulatories or the different compliance and standards can be enforced with the help of the similar tool, which is completely transparent to the administrator, and they were never being aware of that what is happening. So the way you are accessing your information right now, just by clicking on a button or an application which is connecting, let's say open a telnet and then start managing your system. So the user experience, the administrator experience remains same, though the controls automatically ensures that whatever the activities are being performed by the particular administrator, those are tagged to that role, as well as those are something which are being recorded and filtered, and the adequate rights are being given to manage that kind of information. So that was from me.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, just to add to that, what we are in short doing is basically ensuring that there's no proliferation of discretionary access. So one is controlling discretionary access and auditing it. That's defined by the policy. And one example of that would be the way in which we basically implement that as far as access to database is concerned. So DBS generally have super user rights, and they can actually access just about any table, anything out there. Now, if your policy defines that they can't actually do a few things, few operations on a table, that needs to be actually enforced, as well as the fact that it has to be recorded. You also need to find out who is this guy related to, how is this employee morale, which organization is he part of, sub-organization is he part of. So there's a lot of internal intelligence within the organization that you need to marshal along with the security information. So there's basically discretionary access that's happening in an unofficial fashion. You need to be alerted about it, and then basically you need to investigate, armed with a lot more information. So this basically is our approach to contain and rather predict a larger event from happening and preventing it. So that's the model, the threat prediction and prevention model that we use in security. Basically comes out of interacting with about 134 CISOs. And this is an example page from that, since we were talking about metrics of measurement and how 3 grades of CISOs from different organizations with different maturity levels. Responders are those who basically respond post facto to a security event having taken place and exploit having taken place. Protectors are those who look to actually prevent something from happening. And influencers are those who can actually predict and act based on trends. So obviously they are the most advanced. You can see that they measure their security based on a range of metrics, ranging from compliance all the way down to new technology. And as you can see, obviously the responders are nowhere there as far as all these factors are concerned. Responders are basically just looking at vulnerability from scanners or from audit scans or pen tests. Vulnerability is something that is a point-in-time picture of your network. It keeps on growing as you basically commission new systems. That's where standards come into picture. And they have to be executed. And risk and ability to deal with future threats, which is perhaps a tick mark as far as most of the responders are concerned. As far as we are concerned, we are trying to take our clients from responders to influencers. And that basically means a lot of investment in people, process, and technology. And that's basically the thrust of the job here. And for this roadmap to be effective, and these, like I said, 15, 20, 30 projects to actually be carried out, one needs to map into the industry imperatives that you have. So which is something that we will potentially talk about in the second section. Do we have a break now?
No, carry on.
Buy a break or a coffee break or something?
We can ask someone to start serving coffee if people need. Send someone in with the coffee.
Okay. So
I have a question for you. About that, just about that. Thinking that you are an expert here in security and all that. Do you think that now the CFO concept is there, right? CFO concept about security and shit, or whatever the things or auditors, something like that. That should be under CIO or should be the
CIO, first of all, needs to get a seat on that table, on the planning table, as far as business initiatives are concerned. That is the first step. The CISO has a double report. One is into the CIO, obviously, because he's talking about IT systems, and most importantly, about the way in which they're configured, and therefore their security, and the life cycle of the information, because you're all secure, you're basically information organizations. The second most important report of a CISO is into the CFO, because the CFO is concerned about risk. He's the guy who is really concerned about risk. The CEO is forward-looking. He's basically looking to the future, looking to alliances, looking to building the ecosystem, looking at industry trends and how to move it forward. Not that security is not a part of that ball game, but the CFO is the route to get to that, because the CFO is also responsible for compliance.
correct, but theoretically it is right. I have not seen anywhere the CFO reporting to CFO. Sorry, CEO.
To the CEO.
Yeah,
they do.
That's how the places.
In many organizations in India, it is happening. You start from telecom to banking to any other major sector. The CISO role has been evolved. They are reporting to CFOs. Evolved already. So they have already reached to CFO and the top executive, the CEO.
See, I'll say one of the roles which a CISO has to do is that he is to be an auditor of the CIO. If he is reporting to CIO, the purpose is defeated.
See, the do-I checker
concept. He reports to the CEO, otherwise there is no use.
So the compliance
Might
review
well
board,
just remove that head count.
the compliance review board has got two seats, mandatory, so CISO as well as CIO. So it's not like CIO only will represent, the IT. There will be another seat for security officer.
So information is there beyond IT, so which need to be protected. Somebody has to put a focus beyond IT, so that is the reason this CISO concept and the information management has come.
Normally the people you have to deal with, you are talking about a telecom or IT company.
No, banking.
Manufacturing, which is manufacturing or retailing, something like that. The CEO is simply telling CEO this is your baby, you have to manage the whole thing, whatever security is there, whatever innovation, all of things. Let's go to manage.
I think he's absolutely right. And that is, so we will say that what is the ratio, so I'll say whatever you are saying is around 80 to 85% is right. Today also the CISO is reporting to CIO in most of the organization, at least in India. Because that maturity, so it has started. So the sectors and the focus has started, and slowly and gradually you will see that the alignment is happening. And the standards will enforce those alignments.
I think we'll have this discussion over drinks. It's not over. But would you like to proceed with the industry here?
Yeah, so I'll basically leave you with this sampler of the experts report as well as the CISO report. If you are interested, do let Tinu know, and he will basically send this across to you as part of the email. So please make sure you leave your cards behind in that fishbowl there, so that he can get across to you, reach out to you. Tinu basically is a marketing executive for security specifically. And also in the room is Mohit, who is our sales lead for the North and East. And he would be a single point of contact for, I'm sure you'll have a lot of interest in IBM security capabilities and products going forward. And Mohit will basically be your contact to take that discussion. So what I want to do is now shift gear and basically try to address how to make this whole thing relevant to your specific industries. Obviously, I'm going to take a few industries just to kick off the discussion. I'm sure I've not touched on logistics. Maybe you can bring up your specific issues there. Just from the standpoint of how security contributes to the top line. I want to get down from here because I have fear of falling down. This is right at the edge. You can hear me, right?
Yeah. Your plane kicks in exactly 1 hour after you're sitting on it. Huh?
Yeah, I was shifting around.
It's when you notice it.
You've reached to the threshold.
Yeah, exactly.
See, he was compliant, She realized that compliance is not everything.
Not able to make this. Okay, you've done it. So, great. Thanks. Yeah. Switch going down. Okay. So essentially, this discussion is about number one, how security contributes to the top line. And that's an important discussion. We need to address this. And the second fact is that we need to, security is all about sense making. So let me jump into this with a metaphor, which I've been using for a while. Yeah. The metaphor is based on security in the defense realm. As far as the defense industry is concerned, where I essentially come from, I've been working in defense and public safety for a long time. C5I is the frame of reference. Defense forces are getting network-centric, just like you are getting network-centric. Yeah? And they rely on information. Information about how much ammunition is in an ammunition dump. Does that ammunition dump exist? Has it been blown out? What about the fuel dump? These are all logistics issues. And any battle plan that is actually, implemented to be executed for combat operations at the ops level essentially depends on the reality of the situation right out there. So the headquarters have to have situational awareness about what exactly is their front line, your own force and the enemy. Also, it has to be aware of the realities of what's there in the field. So there's a lot of information flow happening between ops and HQ. Just like within your organization, within various branches, from various branches to HQ, you need to have a lot of information. You have a lot of information flow happening with regards to sales management, ops on a periodic basis. All of you are information organization. So this is actually quite graphically described in defense. So net centricity is driving you to this. This is opening a channel of threat, which is threat to information security. That's basically what we're talking about. bottom, you have two aspects which keep your security infrastructure current and make sure that it's basically, there's a reality check on it. Because the envelope, security envelope is being pushed by the attacker. So you've got to keep pace with him, or rather expect him to be at a particular place and basically leapfrog from. So that can only be done with having the right infrastructure in place, having the right processes in place, people in place. That's basically defined by the governance. Now let's peel the onion one layer at a time. C2, which is basically command control, is all about situational awareness. As far as security is concerned and security infrastructure is concerned, you must have heard of security intelligence and event management systems. Most often, these basically are point systems. You buy it from all these security vendors. And they are not connected to your intrusion prevention systems. They are not connected with your identity management systems. They are not connected with, your appliance or other application security systems or endpoint security systems. So in other words, it's just there. And the guy who's looking at it is called the Security Operations Center. So we have a Security Operations Center. Mr. Verma is taking care of it. What is he doing? He's staring at that CM screen. That's about it. But this CM is not really fully implemented. You have not actually implemented business rules that are specific to your organization's model. So C2 is all about implementing that and connecting it with the other arms that execute security within your organization. Also, those other arms inform you about what's the security activity that's happening, who's logging on to what system, when, what did he do before that, what did he do after that, what is really an alert, what is a false positive, what is a false negative, and so forth. The other aspect is anomaly detection. So anomaly detection is basically any variance from defined behavior needs to be picked up. An example could be a server has a pattern of generating, 2 megabits per second of bandwidth consumption. Generally, across the year, that's how it is. Mostly burst traffic. But suddenly, somebody is sending out an entire Oracle table over IRC session. And then you see a huge jump in the bandwidth. You can pick up something that's happening, some activity, which could be part of something that's going to follow going forward. Yeah? So that's an anomaly. In the real world, in a 9/11 situation, any variance in the flight path that hit the World Trade Center, a very graphic example, is basically what you can think of as a variance. And the variance could have been picked up, that anomaly could have been picked up. So that's basically something that allows you to leapfrog the attacker. That's a key thing. And people miss it. The other thing is, you buy 25 intrusion prevention systems and feel you're secure. They're not fully implemented, actually. They're not informing anybody. And you're very happy that the 25,000 alerts on the input side are getting filtered down to 1,000 alerts. Can you handle 1,000 alerts a day? Just to give you an example, Chevron, which is one of our customers, they have basically 2 billion alerts a day that come from their security devices. But the way in which we've implemented their systems, they end up with 10 alerts at the end of the whole chain after filtering. Those 10 alerts require perhaps 40 people as far as people that you need to hire to actually sort it out. So you need to consider the fact that you're running 3 shifts and you need a backup resource to actually, people go on leave, people get sick. So you need to consider things like this when you get into operational mode, which is something I guess Saurabh can talk to. Moving forward, there's the other layer, which is basically combat. For you guys, it's not combat, it's operations, right? So it's operations, just translating, and then you have communications and computers, which are part of any organization anyway. the key aspect there is sense and respond. So, like I said, that internal attacker that you have, who you sensed, is sending that Oracle table out of the IRC chair. He's a demoralized, perhaps a demoralized person. Do you know more about him? Do you know about who he reports to? Who he basically interacts with? Who are the other system administrators who basically he could have influenced? What are they responsible for? What are those systems they are responsible for? Can we predict what might happen if this guy is not actually controlled or he's not watched in a honeypot mode? So, being able to sense more, being able to bring more information, marshal more information around the security intelligence is a key thing. That's how you can actually preempt a vector or an exploit from happening. Third one is basically the last field is intel. So intelligence essentially, internal intelligence, you have multiple sources. External intelligence, bringing it all together and marshalling it, making it contextual in your specific context. That's called fusion. So lots of work happening in intelligence around fusion. And that's relevant to 80% of the data that you have in most of your organizations is unstructured. It's basically PDFs. It's basically your text files which have been converted into PDFs or Word documents. Or you have things like basically emails. Emails basically which are corrigenda to contracts, warranties. So the warranty initially is one particular letter. You negotiate it and you get a corrigenda. That's basically a PDF or an email that came through. How do you actually record that information? It needs to be there somewhere. That's 80% of the information. 20% of the information is the easy part, which is basically the data warehouse and the operational data store, OLAP, and stuff like that. Both these need to be brought together. This is where the trend is towards what's called big data. So you must have heard a lot about big data. And we have a platform called Big Insights that brings it together. We basically implement this in conjunction with security intelligence to make more sense of what's going on, especially in larger environments. This is just to give you an idea. Now, this is the channel that's attacked because you open up through that centricity your operations to attacks. And this is the cheapest channel of attack, like you can see over here, right? Sorry about this. Since we're talking about it, let's specifically switch to that slide I want to show you. Give me a sec. So anything can be explained through economics. That's the one channel that describes everything. Over here, what we see is cyber is the channel, and you're facing cyber left, right, and center because it's the cheapest channel of attack, of asymmetric attack. Attack that costs you nothing, a few keystrokes somewhere, costs monumental damage on the other side, which is asymmetric. So it's an asymmetric threat, can happen asynchronously just about at any point in time. Those jokers who are attacking your networks are basically wonderfully connected, fully armed with tools, and fully armed with information. The point is, why are we not? So if you want to counter it, you need to have the power of merged information in your hands. And today, look at the situation where most organizations haven't actually implemented haven't implemented security intelligence, which is the first step. Forget about merging it with the other information within the organization. That's the second step. So this is something that we need to take care of before we can reach a stage where we can say we are actually secure to some extent. So one needs to consider this fact very seriously, which is why basically we spoke about this and bring this specific thing up. This slide is from a paper from the RAND Corporation that talks about, compares cyber war. Cyber war is now treated as a theater of warfare. The response to cyber war in most countries is now basically going to be declaration of war. And that's what's coming slowly and steadily. And this is a better option than kinetic war or terror, because it still costs money to do those things. This one is, in a network situation, something that's real. It's real in our country. We can't really say that our systems are discrete and are not connected. All our power systems are connected, north, east, and west. You can bring the whole damn thing down at any point in time. We need to secure these systems. Any manufacturing unit can be brought down. Stuxnet is an example of that. I don't need to talk about Stuxnet. All of you know about it. In-band plus out-of-band. There's no intelligence to it. Of course, the intelligence is all in the data that got transferred to the PLCs that control the centrifuges. But how did they get across to the centrifuge and to the PLCs and to the SCADA network? It was by a USB stuck in somewhere. Yeah. So that's the importance of the whole thing. We're not saying tomorrow that BMW will be attacked that way, but there is a potential. One needs to be prepared for that. And what we're talking about with security infrastructure is just the basic first steps. And we've got to ensure that we are leveraging the most through our investments that we're making in that space. Yeah. I guess all of us can continue with the refreshments as we carry on. There's a bunch of slides here that I'm going to go through, and you can stop me just about anywhere. Fundamentally, these are your challenges. And the arrows that you can see basically point to what you need to do. And this applies to just about anybody, large organizations, small organizations. And small organizations basically have a different risk model. Obviously, they will have a different pattern of how they want to invest based on that risk model. They may have a different risk capacity. But we still need to use the overall methodology here to define where we basically want to focus. So what we see here are persistent threat vectors, the people who are basically trying to exfiltrate information from you, attack your networks, seek out hosts which are vulnerable. And why are these hosts vulnerable? Not because of any rocket science that they're trying to break in, just because you have organizational amnesia. You have 25 administrators. Between them, lots of information is falling through the cracks. So there is no fusion of information that's happening. They are all different qualities of administrators, different capabilities. So obviously they leave gaps here and there. Two is, you have asymmetric threats. I did discuss asymmetric threats. The threat surface is forever expanding. Finally, you are networked, so you're bound to be attacked. So this is a reality. What do you need to do? Have insight, of course, from information that you possess. I'm not talking about intelligence information from outside, about what the ISI is doing, but basically your own information that's relevant to you. Visibility of the threat. This could be a competitor. This could be just about anybody. Readiness to act. This could also be a function of the information that you are actually publicly making. An event where you are announcing a particular facility that's being inaugurated by the Chief Minister. You made that public. You made yourself open to a whole bunch of possibilities to attack this. So you need to consider all these things. Fundamentally, the framework is risk. And as you can see in this slide here, risk is across the board, including risks that God throws at you, which is right on the right of this last column of this slide. Other than that, of course, there are other systemic risks, people risk, organizational risks. This is a framework that we use to define a risk model, and which also drives the governance. So it's top-down in the sense that you define strategically what should be the risk model based on the signals that are coming from the working level, from the networks. from the network administrators and the events they're reporting and the patterns of events they're reporting. So at the top level, at the strategic level, you define that, yeah, this particular risk I can manage with, even if it happens 4 times, I'll start watching when it happens the 5th time. I'll take action when it happens the 6th time. So you have a big risk appetite for that. You're not going to spend a lot on systems, but you'll have a process to oversee it. Whereas there are other areas where risk is non-negotiable. You cannot have any risk at all. Access to your financial systems, perhaps. Access to core bank. Access to customer information system for a telco. It's non-negotiable. In which case you're going to actually make sure that you implement privileged identity management. If you haven't, obviously, you're in for something interesting very soon. So that's risk appetite. And risk appetite defines investment. So when you are as a CISO basically gunning for some investment to be made, you have to appeal to the risk appetite and point to that specifically. Of course, the second aspect is showing how that investment will make money. Yeah. So, I'll just walk through some industry-specific areas. So let me jump defense because I've already talked about that. Let's take a bank, right? On the right are investments in security that need to be made. On the left are banking priorities. We need to consider as CISOs to map these security investments to those banking priorities. For example, for a particular bank, going after underbanked or unbanked customers is a key thing. Reaching out to rural customers is a big thing, which basically means that the banking system needs to go out to the rural countryside. You, as a bank, as Citibank, don't know about Rabi and Kharif, Fasal. You don't know the cycle of funding that is required for the farmer. So you need to have a partner right out there who basically is more conversant with these things, who needs to access your systems. And loan origination needs to change. You can't have loan origination happening at the branch anymore. So what are you going to do? This is a banking model where there are 1 billion farmers out there. So there is business. And there's a business that hasn't been ever tapped. So you're going to basically take over from the lender out there and give a better rate. And you're more fair in the whole ball game of giving funds out. Trade financing, right? At a farmer level. So in a situation like this, there is money to be made, but you're not sure how much money there is to be made. So what are you going to do? You're going to put your core bank systems into the cloud, where you pay as you go. So it's basically operational expense model rather than capital expenditure that you make. Now here, the CISO steps in. If that is the case, you're opening yourself up to a host of other security issues. And if I cover you for those security issues, obviously on the one hand you'll be complying, on the other hand you will basically make these business models safe to execute. And for a bank, safety is everything. So security now is actually contributing to the top line. Take the second one, social banking, right? You're providing banking through a Facebook channel. You're providing small loans for the purchase of laptops or something like that, in conjunction with a dealer or a vendor or something like that, to a small user group. You are actually taking information back from that social channel about new services that you've launched. Can you do this without IT, and can you do this without security? You can't actually make it happen. So you're again mapping to a new model. And this basically maps to the driver, which is called cross-channel, multi-channel banking. And channel transformation, right? This is a huge thing for banks. So these are some of the examples. And the third one is mobile banking. Mobile banking is just about everything in these markets, in the emerging economy, as well as, of course, the W3 economies. So transforming the entire branch model is a key thing. But that cannot happen without security to be in place. So it's no longer a bottom line game. Let's move to telco. This is the situation with telco. Fundamentally, this bikini style presentation, that box that you see on the right, is what's happening in telco. So basically, revenue and demand are getting, are basically cleaving, right? The demand for data is going up. Revenue to be made from there is zilch. But the infrastructure you need to invest for that is huge. Therefore, what you do as a telco, you have zero value and you rely on the content provider, which is a Google or a Skype or somebody else. Through that channel, you make no communication dollars. But you provide plumbing to what are called the over-the-top providers, which is all these guys, content providers. The second big aspect here is that the content has to be close to the client. Otherwise, it's no use. The streaming happens, the guy can't be waiting for a 30 FPS video to arrive forever and for it to be buffered. So you need to have a data center close to the user. The content needs to be shifted around for the south in Madras and for the north somewhere in Delhi or whatever it might be. So increasingly, money will be made out of these channels. Therefore, you move to a 4G network. And you also open up yourself to a threat channel. And this is where the investment has to be made to secure it. Yeah? This is your new network. And your new network, lo and behold, is entirely IP. Plus the new, new model of security that's been thrown at you, which is IPv6, which is opening up a whole bunch of new holes as far as security is concerned. The entire thing is basically talking about all layers of security that are relevant over here. Application security, because without applications, all this is useless. It's all about apps. Who is actually producing these apps? How do you license these apps? How do you make sure they are secure? All this becomes your responsibility. Yeah? So this is as far as telco is concerned. Look at SCADA. This is a typical manufacturing distribution network that you can see. On the left is basically generation of power. On the right essentially is distribution of power. And the easiest part, which is the transmission line, which needs to be secured, which is basically two substations. One substation, which is basically a step up and a step down station on the other side, plus the transmission tower, which has its own components that need to be secure. On the left, what's happening is completely digital generation side. So the customer information as well as the engineering information need to be brought together. Now, what is the engineering model to support this? You'll be very surprised. It's this. This spaghetti NIST model basically supports the entire infrastructure. And you can see that there are, at the top level cursory view, about 6 points of threats that you can look at. From the demand side, from the meters that exist outside your houses, which basically are intelligent meters, they can be taken for a ride. There's no security on them. All the substations have computers and networks to inform the generation side as to what demand will potentially be, and therefore the load distribution systems to let them know that they should match the demand. You will be feeding energy back into the grid, so that's basically a smart grid side of things. On the generation side, your entire SCADA system that's responsible to generate power basically depends on intelligence, on controls from the SCADA system, which can basically be taken for a ride, hijacked as well. So you can see that This is from the industrial side of things. This applies to power, this applies to just about any manufacturing industry, this applies to, this applies to oil and gas as well. These are critical installations. This goes down, everything goes down. Okay. I just skip through this. Fundamentally, as far as cyber is concerned, the only option you have is to prevent. That's all you can do. And that's basically why, as we go forward and we get more and more connected, we need to actually look at this option of leapfrogging the attack. Why? Attribution. You attributed the attack to somebody. He's actually sitting in Lithuania or Congo and doing it for somebody out of China. Attributed to China, so what? Doesn't matter. Retaliate, who will you retaliate against? Nobody. Deterrence, there is no nuclear deterrence here. You can't frighten them. What can you frighten them with? A message or a letter or what? You can attack them sub rosa under the table. That's one way to do it. That's how nations do it, which is basically things like, you set up new controls as far as trade is concerned to take care of things. But what is key for organizations as well as nations is to prevent this. And for preventing, we need to predict what's going to happen. So I will basically leave it here because we have a lot of areas to discuss, and basically the few slides that I jumped over are all about information fusion. You wanted to say something?
No, I was going to, because we left some for a lot of discussion, I just wanted to ask people and get some discussion from here. So we've laid out, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Krishna has laid out a lot of trends for next year, for 2013 actually, this year. I just wanted to ask one question. How are we preparing for it? And I just want to take a few individual cases. What is it that I asked in the beginning, what is it that we fear? What are the trends that we are seeing? I just want to ask one or two questions. What is it that we've planned? What are we going to do? And just to get individual cases to start getting some discussions. And would anyone like to share something else before I put someone in a difficult position?
What's your reaction to this discussion? Yeah.
There's someone there.
I'll say the awareness is the key thing. We were talking about compliance. If you make people aware, compliance automatically comes.
Sorry, just introduce yourself and your industry.
I'm Devan Paruthian from Ranbaxy Laboratories Limited. I'm the head of information security there. So what I have felt is, as people are aware of the risk, they start complying to things. If they're not aware, they don't.
Right. So can I take from it that the main job of the CISO in Ranbaxy, so to say, is to make people aware of the risk?
I'll not say that.
Alright. So to generalize it further, you're saying it is the CISO's job to make people aware of what they are.
Again, as it was mentioned, people, process and technology. These are the three pillars of security. So people, by awareness, you're taking care of people. Then you have to use technology to secure certain things, and then the process should have certain controls built in so that you can mitigate the risk.
What you're essentially saying is that awareness is going to drive the other two things.
Yes.
So have you planned something around awareness?
We will do it. We do it. Trainings are the traditional methods that you implement. Then you can have phishing exercises. You can send emails and people click with them, and then you tell them that you were tricked. So you can implement.
How many of us have partnered or taken part in the CERT India exercises that happen? So CERT India simulates a lot of cyber attacks, and it makes you aware of a lot of new things that happen every now and then. How many of us have participated in any of those? They are extremely brilliant and extremely difficult attacks. Right. So just take a note. Go search about this. You will really thank yourself for doing that.
So these exercises are basically broken into red team, blue team, and white team. White team is the supervisory team. Red team goes after a bunch of attacks, and they make the attacks. And the blue team essentially tries to prevent these. So NATO has adopted this approach in a big way, and certs within various countries are doing it. Cert in India is also, doing it certainly with the larger organizations, and they open it up. So this is basically a key means of testing where you stand, where your response basically stands as far as threats are concerned, response to threats are concerned. So that's a key thing that we, perhaps something that I would like to point you to. Consider that. Which gives you a reality check on where you stand, necessarily.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to share what they're planning for 2013? Anything big?
Let's take run back, see. What are the big plans as far as your operations are concerned?
I'll not be able to disclose everything, but yeah, we are planning a lot of things. One is related to identity management. So there are many things in the plan. Mobility again is in the plan. We have just implemented something which is mobility, but we want to move ahead a little bit when it comes to mobility, because every day I receive requests. I want email or the services on my mobile device. Few of them are approved, few of them are not. So I hate to say no certain times, because because we are actually servicing our users, and if we are not able to, then there is something which the user don't think that we are doing our job properly. So there, yes, we are investing something there. There are other initiatives also which are in the plan.
Mobile security.
That's actually emerged as a trend in this room. Everyone has spoken or raised their hand on mobile security. Anyone, Anuj, why don't you tell what you're planning for 2013?
We did a couple of exercises for this for the entire organization to start with, because we felt like that there is something which is missing in the entire organization. So we did the exercise not for the IT department, we did the entire exercise for the entire company. So we have identified the risks for all the functions of the company. So we identified a few of the risks, and then we jot down and we made a team for the individual functions and reviewed it. And later on we did the exercise for the IT as well, as a separate exercise for us. So we are implementing the ISO 27001, but not into the direction of taking the certification only, just to have the right procedures and process into the place.
Okay, thank you. Neeraj is happy to hear that. Sorry, why don't you talk about what Tata.com is doing?
There are a lot of initiatives that we are doing, and one of them is around bring your own device. Because we operate out of 180 countries worldwide. So things are diverse. We have almost no clue kind of thing at times what this device is.
Does that seem familiar to anyone else?
So, and from weird locations, sometimes you have to first search the place on the globe where it is and then do it. But it's part of fun, but it's very tricky.
Basically around BYOD. Anyone would like to share something they've done on BYOD that's actually helped? Because let's get into solutioning now. Because everyone is talking about mobility and BYOD. Would you like to point one or two things about BYOD or mobility?
We did touch on that. I mean, leaving the products and the solutions alone, the key thing is knowing what you have, essentially the inventory. So that's a key thing, that's a key starting point. And if you are putting in place a system that sufficiently basically manages these endpoints, it should start with a top-class inventory management as far as these devices are concerned. What are they? What's the platform? What's the state of security patching on those systems and so forth? That's a key thing. The second aspect of it is basically policy enforcement. Policy enforcement when the device is owned, and policy enforcement and wiping off data when it's lost, when it's declared lost or whatever it might be. So that's a key thing, and that has to be around the clock process. Obviously, your process, your policies also need to be changed once in a while, in response or in a proactive measure as far as how threats are basically coming up. So you need to be at a capability level to be able to do that. But it's a journey to get there. So that's perhaps a good segue to discuss how we look at security. And for those of you who are not familiar with IBM's capability, it might be a good idea to talk through the security model. Of course, I will show you an obligatory slide on what solutions we have, and that's a key thing. There's quite a few people who do not have significantly, good idea that IBM is actually offering software capabilities in this area. So if you look at the way we look at security, at the base, you have the products which are laid out in a well-defined architecture. And that is a security architecture, which needs to be defined in a very clear way, which needs to have components of a life cycle. Even things like, encryption keys that you have in the organization need to have a life cycle. Privileged identities need to be managed so that they don't proliferate, so that they're not dependent on people coming in and taking on roles in the organization and then leaving. So they should be dependent on the purpose of why that person is accessing a particular system. Yeah. So that's one aspect of the whole thing. So that's where all the products actually map. On top of which, you have foundational security management. This is a key aspect. These are the processes that ensure that security is managed, policies are modified, life cycles are predefined, and basically according to your risk model and the risk appetite, which is something that changes perhaps every quarter, perhaps every week. At the top, essentially, is your reference model. The reference model derives from a whole bunch of standards. And then basically that translates into controls, which Neeraj has alluded to in his piece of the discussion. So all brought together is what we call security. This is the life cycle as far as security is concerned, as far as we are concerned. On the left, on the right, for you, are all the systems that are, all the assets in your organization that are being protected, such as networks, storage, hosts and endpoints, and applications. So yours is an information organization. So that drum at the bottom is the most important. That is what you're actually securing. What flows out and flows into the drum is defined by the rest of the assets that you own at the top of it. And the context in which that is done, and the credibility and the access levels that are accorded to it defines the flow. And you need to actually ensure that that behavior actually functions according to a defined mechanism. And any variance from set behavior needs to be picked up. All the post-facto behavior patterns are recorded in logs. Today, if you are a company, we are basically responders, or perhaps somewhere there, we basically look at logs, and logs are post-facto information. What is flowing on the networks needs to be monitored, which is network flow, in conjunction with what has happened in the past. Because an exploit is basically a chronological event. One thing happens after the other, and you can break in and take action at any point in time if you're able to predict what potentially is going to happen going forward. So right is all that. At the top of which is your business. So that's basically your organization. On the left to that within that big rectangle is basically the security components that secure these assets, working downwards from identity access management, all the way down to physical asset management. Yeah, needless to say. Now, the fundamental key thing is the piece that you have over there, which is that small diagram that you see, is where the security events are being monitored by a bunch of people who are security specialists. These are not the guys who will do the password reset. These guys sit in the Security Operations Center, which is what you see at the bottom there. And the Security Operations Center feeds your GRC platform, which is that diagram to the left of that, to the extreme bottom left of that. And the GRC platform essentially is informed of the current state of your security posture. That defines your command and control as far as security is concerned, or your situational awareness. Any threats that you basically recognize happening, you tactically interdict. And that's what the red arrow is all about. That's intrusion prevention that you do tactically. At the same time, from a strategic standpoint, you modify security policy. And when you modify this security policy, we have platforms to help you actually automate compliance on it and enforce that security policy, such as on endpoints. Yeah. So Neeraj and I can't actually just change the password or shut up the password on our iPhones because we are accessing IBM mail, which is a nuisance access. You have to have, it has a password policy which while driving is the most difficult to actually key in. And you're driven to do that when you receive some sort of a SMS that you need to respond to or whatever else. So that's just an example. If I switch it off, it will ask me to reset before I can use the phone on my iPad or my laptop or whatever it is. And of course, when you connect back to the network, it will inform my manager. And then, of course, he can take his own action, and then he'll be monitored whether he's actually informed me that he has sent me an arrest warrant or whatever it might be. So that's how you enforce the security policy. And you also change the security policy based on the risk posture, which is also defined by your regulatory compliance, which is what you see in that cycle over there. So this complex is how we define security. It's an entirety, a holistic cycle, which is not just products, but a few other things as well. Now, if we are talking about products, this is what we have. We look at security essentially, like I said, breaking down into infrastructure at the very bottom. This maps to the ISO 7-layer model, of course. Then you have applications that consume the data, above which you have people who access the applications, right? And you can see over here, listed essentially under each area, the products that we have actually either acquired or basically we had dispersed across the various units within our organization, which we have actually combined into what we call the IBM Security Division, which I represent, Mohit represents, and all of us over here, IBMers essentially represent. Both from a software standpoint, from a firmware standpoint, because most of these are appliances, and from a practitioner standpoint, from a person who basically talks about security management. So this is how we look at security. Not like most of the vendors, it's not one product here and one product there, one partner product which is thrown in to do the third thing, but all these pieces. And IBM is not an applications company. We don't have a CRM system or a SAP system or something like that. So the applications part is not really focused on. For example, if it's basically directory integration, we will support all the directories in the industry. but we are more focused on the management of those directories. This is just to give you an example. We don't have a firewall, but we will actually manage the most important thing about firewalls, which is basically the configuration. Any variances in configuration. Did some joker come and change a firewall rule? That's what's important to see, not really the firewall log, which is going to give you a huge allow deny, which, yeah, great, makes no sense anyway. So that's a key thing. That's basically the way we look at the software space. And at the top, what you can see basically is GRC. We have a platform, which is the Open Pages platform. Information Fusion, which is our big insights or big data platform. Risk analytics for finance specifically, and that too for credit and market risk is basically algorithmics. And then we have investigation management. This applies both to crime primarily, but also could be used over here, which is visualizing investigation. So how does an intelligence investigator look at the field of crime? Look at the suspect, look at suspect relationships. So that's done over a platform called I2. So, like I said, most of these are acquisitions, and the other half essentially are products that we've traditionally carried as part of the software stack dispersed in the organization which we pulled together. So that basically represents what our software capability is in conjunction with the delivery and O&M capability, as well as the methodology, which is represented by Neeraj over here. Just to give you a sample and example. Yeah, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If you have any closing remarks, Neeraj, please.
I'd like to we've heard Krishnan, and obviously I started with the standards. We have had the experience with our different clients in different industries who are using our security framework. And it actually, I'll give you a different context that last week I was reading one article where one person goes to this guitar shop, guitar teacher, and he said, I know a little bit of guitar, how to play. How much will you charge per month? He says, $100 per month. The other person came there and he says, I don't know anything about guitar. How much will you charge? He says, I'll charge only $50. Then the other person asked, why are you charging me double? Because I've already learned something. He said, $50, I'm charging what you have learned, I'll learn. So the context what I'm saying is that there are companies who are using standards. There are different organizations where we have seen the deployment of those standards, but the end-to-end spectrum of information security, taking that complete coverage is what the key to it. So we are giving you the IBM CIO report, which Krishnan has said. We are also giving you IBM CISO report, which was promised. And third thing is that Chief Information Security Officer should sit side by side with the risk officer and the fraud and risk officer. So there are three things which are given. For fourth and fifth and sixth we charge. So we have Mohit, right?
Yeah.
So we have Mohit to contact for that. We'll be happy to come and definitely sit with you to understand your business risks and your challenges. And that's where IBM is focusing on these areas. Last year, Ginny Rometty, who is our chairman and CEO, took over from Sam Palmison. One of the key factors what she's been driving is the client experience team, where we sit and make sure that client understand and feel that IBM is the most essential company, the most essential part of my organization for growth. So we bring those, not only Krishnan and Saurabh and Neeraj, and there are a bunch of people there. Some of them are sitting in research and some of them are sitting working right with the client, and bring that technical expertise with you right across and solving those critical business issues with reference to information security. Thank you very much for your time and patient listening.
Thank you once again, Krishnan. Thank you once again, Neeraj. Thank you, Saurabh. Drinks are now served outside. Sorry for having been delayed a little bit, but bar is open as I can see, and there are people helping themselves. So let's move there.